I was so excited when Bill suggested this idea to me because I have seen the Henry plays before, but I had never actually sat down to read Henry IV Part 2. I'm so struck by, there are a couple of intense separations that happen at the end of this play. This is the play in which Hal divorces himself from his best friend, Falstaff. And really, not long before that, he loses his father, King Henry. And it's so much a play about growing up and taking on responsibility. And so I was excited because I knew Part 2 was the part of the Henriad in which those major events happened to this young man, Hal. When I started to read the play, though, I was really surprised at how full the world of the play is and how it is about Prince Hal, but more than that, it's really about a country trying to organize itself after a major war seems to be over, but it's not. And it really captures that messy time in a country's development when you might think the war is over, but the real work is now beginning, and all of the chaos and the politics and the grappling and the economics that are involved in building something out of the ashes of a war. And there's a lot of imagery in the beginning of the play about building and drafting and making plans and not having the money to bring them to fruition. And I'm really interested in that because I feel like it's so timely. Of course, Shakespeare plays are always timely, and it's amazing how they can be found to be timely in every moment. But I feel like this play, Henry IV Part 2, which seems externally to be so very English, is actually very, very full of the kind of problems that we as Americans are facing. We're in the middle of a new administration. There was a lot of great hope for this administration, and yet look at the messes that have come down on the heads of this administration. And I think in Henry IV Part 2, the question, how do we feel about the coming new administration, is so alive. I mean, we really don't know who to root for in Henry IV Part 2. We miss Hotspur. You know, we're not even sure at the very beginning of the play if he's even dead. We like Hal, we want to like Hal, but we're not sure we can trust him. We love Falstaff, but we know we can't trust him. So who are we to root for? And that kind of chaos that happens when a new administration comes in, or when a country is being born, as it is in Iraq, sort of having to be reborn now. That's what this play is about, that kind of wildness. Henry IV Part 2 is a big play. It's full of all kinds of wild characters. It takes place in a court, in a brothel, in the country, in the living room of the primary rebels, and it feels like a play with a very rich strata, with very, and it's a play full of chaos. And I think that's where the fun and the energy come from in this play, even though in the end it really has a lot of elements of, it has dark elements that I'm not sure are as present in Part 1. And it certainly is dealing with the issues of mortality and aging, but in a really, in a spectacular and sort of carnivalesque way. I think the play looks at those questions and leaves us at the end hoping for a better world, hoping that Hal will be a good leader, but unsure. And I just have a feeling that that question about leadership is going to ring deeply for a lot of Americans watching this play. What will it be? By then it'll be the third year of the Obama administration. I directed a fellow a few years back out on the Elizabethan stage, and I was just thinking about how different Henry IV Part 2 is from Othello. In a way, they're both political plays, but I thought that Othello was almost like a two-character play, very, very streamlined and very contained play, very taut, very modern, psychologically modern. Henry IV Part 2 feels like a grand mess, on purpose, though. I mean, very chaotic, where Othello was organized, full of human, common people, whereas Othello was about two extraordinary men. Henry IV Part 2 is broad in its scope and its vision, where Othello was like a laser. So I think it's going to be very different than Othello, but I hope to bring the same clarity that I think I was able to bring to Othello to Henry IV Part 2. And I'm really interested in having it be self-contained. Like I don't want people to be afraid of not coming to see it just because they haven't seen Part 1. I think they should see Part 1 and feel assured that they could also just come to see Part 2 on its own. That like in the movie world, sometimes you really don't have to see the first part of the Batman trilogy or whatever to enjoy the middle part. I think it definitely stands on its own, but I definitely am also planning on reminding the audience, just sort of bringing them up to speed, just like one does when one watches, The Wire now, or you have to be reminded previously on, and just to plant those few little important story points that the audience might need to know to be able to take the ride of Henry IV Part 2.